Hi everyone and welcome back to the Horror Hut. Now, I know a lot of you use these videos to sleep, so before you drift off I thought it would be a fun idea if everyone can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from in the world. Also like and subscribe if you are enjoying the episodes. Right, let's get comfy and relax and let's begin. I'm Sarah, and I love exploring the great outdoors. So, when I decided to take a road trip through the desert Southwest, I was beyond excited. The vast expanse of the desert stretched out before me, promising adventure and excitement at every turn. As I drove along the dusty desert roads, I couldn't help but marvel at the rugged beauty of the landscape. But as the sun began to set, I realized that I needed to find a place to rest for the night. That's when I spotted a small gas station up ahead, its neon sign flickering in the fading light. I pulled into the parking lot and stepped out of my car, stretching my legs after the long drive. As I walked towards the gas station, I noticed a group of locals gathered around a table outside, their eyes following me with a suspicious glare. I tried to ignore their stares as I headed inside to pay for my gas. But as I approached the counter, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The attendant behind the counter eyed me warily, his expression unreadable as he took my payment. Feeling uneasy, I quickly grabbed my receipt and headed back to my car, eager to put some distance between myself and the strange locals. But as I turned to leave, I found myself face to face with the group of locals from outside, blocking my path with menacing looks on their faces. My heart began to race as I realized that I was trapped, surrounded by strangers in the middle of nowhere. I tried to push past them, but they only tightened their grip, their hands reaching for me with malicious intent. Panic surged through me as I fought to break free, but the group was too strong, overpowering me with their sheer numbers. I screamed for help, but the desert swallowed my cries, leaving me alone with my terror. Desperate for escape, I lashed out with all the strength I had, landing blows against my attackers as I fought for my freedom. But they were relentless, their grip tightening with each passing moment. Just when I thought all hope was lost, I saw a glimmer of light in the darkness, the headlights of an approaching car. With renewed determination, I fought my way towards the vehicle, my breath coming in ragged gasps as I stumbled towards safety. As the car pulled up beside me, I flung open the door and tumbled inside, relief flooding through me as I realized that I was finally safe. The driver, a kind stranger, wasted no time in speeding away from the gas station, leaving the group of locals behind in the dust. As we drove towards civilization, I couldn't help but reflect on the terrifying encounter I had just endured. The desert may be beautiful, but it's also a harsh and unforgiving place, filled with dangers lurking in the shadows. I'm just an average guy who loves spending time with my family. So, when we decided to go on a cross-country road trip, I was thrilled at the prospect of making memories together. Little did I know, our journey would soon take a terrifying turn. As we drove through the heartland of America, the open road stretched out before us, promising adventure at every turn. But as night began to fall, we found ourselves in need of a place to rest for the night. That's when we stumbled upon a small town in the middle of nowhere, its streets eerily quiet in the darkness. We pulled into the nearest motel, hoping to find shelter for the night. But as we checked in, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about this place. The motel manager eyed us with a suspicious glare, his demeanor cold and unwelcoming. Ignoring my unease, we settled into our room for the night, hoping to get some rest before hitting the road again in the morning. But as we drifted off to sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that lingered in the air. In the dead of night, we were awakened by a loud banging on our door, sending shivers down my spine. I cautiously approached the door, my heart pounding in my chest as I peered through the peephole. To my horror, I saw a group of menacing figures standing outside, their faces obscured by the darkness. Without a moment's hesitation, I bolted the door shut, desperate to keep my family safe from whatever lurked outside. But as the night wore on, the banging only grew louder and more insistent, filling the air with a sense of dread. I knew we had to get out of there, but I had no idea how to escape the nightmare that had engulfed us. With no other options left, I made a split-second decision to break through the window, shattering the glass with a loud crash. As we scrambled out into the night, I could hear the sound of footsteps echoing behind us, growing closer with each passing moment. We ran as fast as we could, our hearts pounding in our chests as we raced through the deserted streets. But no matter how hard we tried, it felt like the town was closing in on us, trapping us in its sinister grasp. Just when I thought we couldn't go on, we stumbled upon a gas station on the outskirts of town, its neon sign flickering in the darkness like a beacon of hope. With renewed determination, we sprinted towards the safety of the station, praying that we could find help before it was too late. As we burst through the doors, gasping for breath, the attendant eyed us with a mixture of surprise and concern. Without hesitation, I pleaded with him to call for help, desperate to escape the nightmare that had consumed us. Thankfully, the attendant didn't hesitate, immediately dialing 911 and summoning help to our location. As we waited for the authorities to arrive, I couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of relief wash over me. In the end, we were lucky to escape with our lives, but the horrors we witnessed in that small town would haunt us forever. I was embarking on a solo road trip along the scenic Pacific Coast Highway, eager for adventure and new experiences. The rugged coastline stretched out before me, the crashing waves and salty air filling me with a sense of freedom and possibility. But as I drove deeper into the secluded areas, the thrill of the open road began to fade, replaced by a growing sense of unease. The winding highway seemed to stretch on forever, the dense forests and rocky cliffs closing in around me like silent sentinels. Suddenly, my car sputtered and lurched to a stop, leaving me stranded on the side of the road in the middle of nowhere. Panic surged through me as I realized that I was completely alone, with no cell service and no one around to help. Desperate for assistance, I set out on foot, hoping to find a nearby farmhouse or gas station where I could get help. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the landscape, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. After what felt like hours of walking, I finally spotted a farmhouse nestled among the trees, its windows glowing warmly in the fading light. Relief flooded through me as I hurried towards it, my heart pounding in my chest. But as I approached the farmhouse, a chill ran down my spine. There was something off about the place, something that sent alarm bells ringing in the back of my mind. Summoning all of my courage, I knocked on the door, hoping that whoever lived there would be able to help me. But as the door creaked open, my blood ran cold. Standing before me was a man, his eyes dark and unreadable, his expression inscrutable. He welcomed me inside with a smile, but there was something about him that set my teeth on edge. Ignoring my instincts, I stepped into the farmhouse, my senses on high alert as I took in my surroundings. The interior was dimly lit and cluttered, with strange symbols adorning the walls and shelves filled with mysterious objects. As the man led me further into the farmhouse, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking into a trap. But before I could turn and run, he motioned towards a chair and urged me to sit down. With a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach, I obeyed, my heart hammering in my chest as I tried to think of a way to escape. But before I could come up with a plan, the man began to speak, his voice low and soothing. He told me that I was safe here, that he and his family were just simple farmers, living off the land and minding their own business. But as he spoke, I noticed something strange about his demeanor, something that didn't quite add up. Suddenly, a loud noise echoed through the farmhouse, causing me to jump in alarm. The man's eyes flickered with something unreadable, and for a moment, I thought I saw a glimmer of malice in them. With a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach, I realized that I was in danger, that the man and his family were not who they claimed to be. But before I could make a move, he lunged towards me, his hands reaching out to grab me. With a scream, I leaped out of my chair and bolted towards the door, my heart pounding in my chest as I raced through the farmhouse. Behind me, I could hear the man's heavy footsteps as he pursued me, his voice raised in anger. But I refused to look back, refused to let fear consume me. With every ounce of strength I had, I pushed myself forward, my lungs burning and my legs aching as I ran for my life. Finally, I burst through the front door and into the cool night air, my heart racing and adrenaline coursing through my veins. Without looking back, I sprinted away from the farmhouse, my only thought to put as much distance between myself and those sinister inhabitants as possible. Hours later, I stumbled into a nearby town, exhausted and terrified but alive. And as I collapsed onto a bench, gasping for breath, I knew that I had narrowly escaped a fate worse than death. But as I sat there, shaking and trembling, I couldn't shake the feeling that those dark forces were still out there, lurking in the shadows. So, I'm this guy who's always looking for adventure, you know? I love getting out into the great outdoors and exploring new places. That's why I decided to take a trip to the Pacific Northwest, where I heard there are some amazing hidden gems just waiting to be discovered. One day, I stumbled upon this remote mountain road that seemed like the perfect place to explore. The scenery was breathtaking, with towering trees and rugged cliffs stretching as far as the eye could see. As I drove deeper into the wilderness, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. It was like I could sense someone or something lurking in the shadows, just out of sight. Suddenly, I heard the sound of gunshots echoing through the trees, sending a chill down my spine. I knew I had to be careful, but I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that washed over me. That's when I saw them, a group of rough-looking men emerging from the forest, their faces twisted into sinister grins. It was clear from the looks in their eyes that they viewed me as nothing more than prey in their deadly game. With adrenaline pumping through my veins, I knew I had to think fast if I wanted to survive. I floored the gas pedal, my heart pounding in my chest as I raced down the winding mountain road, desperate to escape the hunters hot on my trail. But no matter how fast I drove, it felt like they were always one step ahead of me, their shouts and laughter echoing in the distance. It was like they were toying with me, enjoying the thrill of the chase as they closed in for the kill. As I rounded a sharp bend in the road, I saw a steep drop-off looming ahead, with jagged rocks waiting to greet me below. I knew I had to make a split-second decision if I wanted to survive. With no other options left, I slammed on the brakes and swerved off the road, my car careening over the edge of the cliff in a cloud of dust and debris. As I plummeted towards the ground below, I braced myself for impact, praying that I would make it out alive. Miraculously, I survived the fall, though my car was left a mangled wreck at the bottom of the cliff. With adrenaline still coursing through my veins, I stumbled out of the wreckage and into the dense forest, desperate to put as much distance between me and the hunters as possible. For hours, I trudged through the wilderness, my muscles aching and my heart pounding in my chest. Every rustle of leaves and snapping twigs sent me into a panic, fearing that the hunters were still hot on my trail. But as the sun began to dip below the horizon, I finally stumbled upon a clearing where I could catch my breath and collect my thoughts. I knew I couldn't stay in one place for long, but I needed a moment to rest and gather my strength before pressing on. As night fell and the forest grew cloaked in darkness, I huddled beneath the shelter of a towering tree, my eyes darting nervously to and fro in search of any signs of danger. I knew I couldn't let my guard down for a second if I wanted to make it out of this alive. Hours passed in agonizing silence, broken only by the occasional hoot of an owl or the distant howl of a wolf. I felt like I was teetering on the edge of madness, my mind racing with thoughts of the horrors that awaited me if the hunters found me. But just as I was about to lose hope, I heard the distant rumble of an engine in the distance, growing louder with each passing moment. It was the sound of salvation, the promise of rescue from the nightmare that had consumed me. With a newfound sense of determination, I rose to my feet and followed the sound of the approaching vehicle, my heart pounding with anticipation. And as the headlights pierced the darkness and bathed me in their warm glow, I knew that I had finally made it out alive. In the end, I may have escaped with my life, but the memory of that harrowing encounter will haunt me forever. It's a stark reminder of the dangers that lurk in the wild, waiting to ensnare unsuspecting adventurers like me in their deadly trap. Big fan of traveling and exploring new places. So, I decided to plan this road trip through the Appalachian Mountains. Seemed like a great idea at the time, you know? Get out there, see some new sights, take in the beauty of nature. Anyway, as I'm driving along this remote stretch of road, I see this sign for a town up ahead. Figured it might be a good spot to stop and stretch my legs, maybe grab a bite to eat. But when I get there, it's like something out of a horror movie. The town is deserted. I mean, completely empty. Not a soul in sight. It's like everyone just up and vanished into thin air. But here's the really creepy part. There are all these signs of people just going about their daily lives. Cars parked in driveways, clothes hanging on lines, even food still cooking on stoves. At first, I think maybe it's some kind of prank or something. But the longer I stick around, the more I realize that something seriously messed up is going on here. I mean, what kind of town just empties out like that? So, being the curious person I am, I start poking around, trying to figure out what happened. And that's when I start finding these weird clues, like journal entries left behind by the residents, talking about strange sightings in the woods and feeling like they were being watched. The whole thing gives me the creeps, but I can't help feeling drawn to unraveling the mystery. I mean, how often do you stumble upon something like this in real life, right? As I explore further, I start to notice other strange things, like the way the trees seem to whisper secrets to each other as the wind rustles through their leaves, or the way the shadows seem to dance in the corners of my vision. It's like the whole town is alive with some kind of energy, and I can't shake the feeling that I'm being watched. But every time I turn around, there's nobody there. It's like I'm all alone in this deserted town, with nothing but my own thoughts for company. After what feels like hours of searching, I finally stumble upon a clue that sends a shiver down my spine, a blood-stained note hidden beneath a floorboard in one of the abandoned houses. It talks about a group of strangers who came to town one night, bringing with them a darkness that consumed everything in its path. Suddenly, it all starts to make sense. The strange sightings, the feeling of being watched, the eerie energy that seems to hang in the air like a thick fog. This town isn't just deserted, it's cursed. With a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach, I realize that I need to get out of here, and fast. But as I turn to leave, I hear the sound of footsteps echoing through the empty streets, getting closer and closer with each passing moment. Panic sets in as I realize that I'm not alone in this town after all. There's something out there, something dark and sinister, lurking in the shadows and waiting to claim its next victim. With adrenaline coursing through my veins, I sprint towards my car, desperate to escape the nightmare that has consumed this deserted town. I can feel the eyes of whatever is stalking me boring into the back of my skull, urging me to run faster, to never look back. And as I peel out of the town and back onto the open road, I can't shake the feeling that I've narrowly escaped something truly horrific. But one thing's for sure, I'll never forget the day I stumbled upon that deserted town in the Appalachian Mountains, and the chilling mystery that still haunts me to this day. So, me and my dad were on this road trip down south. You know, just trying to bond and spend some quality time together. We'd been driving for hours, and we were both pretty tired, so we decided to pull off the highway and find a place to rest for a bit. We come across this small town that's not on any of the maps, which is kinda weird, but we figure it's just one of those off the beaten path kind of places. Anyway, We pull into the main street and it's like something out of a movie, all dusty old buildings and tumbleweeds rolling down the road. We spot a little diner on the corner and figure it's as good a place as any to grab a bite to eat and stretch our legs. But as soon as we walk in, we can tell something's off. The locals all stop what they're doing and just stare at us, like we're some kind of aliens or something. My dad tries to strike up a conversation with the waitress, but she just gives him this cold, dead-eyed stare and goes back to wiping down the counter. It's like nobody wants us there, like we're not welcome in their little town. We try to ignore the weird vibes and order some food, but it's like the tension in the air just keeps getting thicker and thicker. I can feel the hairs on the back of my neck standing up as we sit there, trying to eat our meal in peace. But then things start to escalate. One of the locals starts muttering under his breath, and before we know it, the whole diner is buzzing with whispered conversations and furtive glances in our direction. My dad tries to keep things light, cracking jokes and trying to make conversation with the other patrons, but it's like nobody wants to engage with us. It's like we're intruders in their little world, and they're not too happy about it. Feeling more than a little uncomfortable, we finish our meal as quickly as we can and head back out onto the street. But as we're getting into the car, I catch sight of a group of locals gathering on the corner, their eyes following us as we drive away. We both breathe a sigh of relief as we leave that weird little town behind us, but the whole experience leaves a bad taste in our mouths. We never did figure out what was going on there, but one thing's for sure, we won't be stopping in any more mysterious towns off the beaten path. Not if we can help it, anyway. So, me and my wife were on this road trip, just trying to get away for a bit and enjoy some time together. We'd been driving for a while, and everything was going great until we noticed this truck behind us. At first, we didn't think much of it. I mean, it's not unusual to see other vehicles on the road, right? But as we kept driving, we started to realize that this truck wasn't just following us, it was tailgating us, getting closer and closer with each passing mile. I tried to shake it off, speeding up a bit and then slowing down, but no matter what I did, the truck stayed right on our tail, like it was glued to our bumper or something. My wife started to get really freaked out, and I have to admit, I was starting to feel pretty nervous myself. I mean, who follows someone like that, especially out in the middle of nowhere? We decided to pull off the highway at the next exit, hoping to lose the truck in the maze of side streets and back roads. But no matter where we went, the truck was right there behind us, like it was playing some twisted game of cat and mouse. By this point, my heart was pounding in my chest, and I could feel the panic rising in my throat. I didn't know what this person wanted from us, but I knew we had to get away from them, and fast. We kept driving, trying to put as much distance between us and the truck as possible. My wife was on the phone with the police, but out here in the middle of nowhere, it felt like we were on our own. Finally, after what felt like hours of tense silence, we spotted a gas station up ahead. We pulled in, hoping that maybe the presence of other people would scare off our pursuer. But as we got out of the car and headed inside, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see the truck parked out front, but it was nowhere to be seen. We hurried inside, trying to act casual even though every instinct was screaming at us to run. My wife went to use the restroom while I paid for the gas, and I tried to keep an eye on the door, just in case. But when my wife came out of the restroom, she was pale as a ghost. She whispered something to me, her voice barely audible over the sound of the cashier ringing up our purchase. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized what she was saying. The truck, it was parked outside, waiting for us. We were trapped, with nowhere to run and no one to help us. I quickly paid for the gas and grabbed my wife's hand, pulling her towards the door. We had to get out of there, before whoever was in that truck caught up to us. We burst out of the gas station and ran to our car, throwing ourselves inside and slamming the doors shut behind us. I started the engine and peeled out of the parking lot, not caring about the screeching tires or the startled looks of the people inside. As we sped away from the gas station, I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw the truck pulling out onto the road behind us, its headlights shining like the eyes of some predatory beast. But this time, we weren't going to let it catch us. We drove faster than we ever had before, pushing our car to its limits as we raced towards the safety of the nearest town. And finally, after what felt like an eternity of terror, we saw the lights of civilization up ahead. We pulled into the town, breathing a sigh of relief as we left our pursuer behind us. We called the police as soon as we arrived, reporting the truck and giving them as much information as we could. But by the time they arrived at the gas station, the truck was long gone, disappearing into the night like it had never been there at all. We never did find out who was driving that truck or what they wanted from us. But one thing's for sure, we'll never forget the terror of being followed, hunted like animals on the open road. And we'll never take another road trip without looking over our shoulders, wondering if our pursuer is still out there, waiting for us to let our guard down once again. Picture this, I'm on this backpacking trip through Europe, just trying to see as much of the continent as I can. I've been traveling for weeks, hopping from one city to the next, and everything's been going great so far. But then I decide to take this detour through the countryside of Eastern Europe. I mean, I've heard it's beautiful out here, with all the rolling hills and quaint little villages. So I figure, why not check it out? I'm driving along these winding roads, just enjoying the scenery, when suddenly I realize that I have no idea where I am. I must have taken a wrong turn somewhere along the way, because none of this looks familiar. I start to panic a little. I mean, I'm out here all alone, with no cell service and no way to contact anyone for help. But then I see this village up ahead, nestled in a valley between the hills, and I figure maybe I can stop there and ask for directions. As I get closer, though, I start to get this weird feeling in the pit of my stomach. I mean, the village looks deserted, there's not a soul in sight, no cars parked on the streets, nothing. But I figure, what the hell, I've got nothing to lose, right? So I pull into the village square and park my car, and I get out to take a look around. The first thing I notice is how quiet it is. I mean, there's no birds chirping, no dogs barking, nothing. It's like the whole place is dead silent. I start walking down the street, calling out for anyone who might be around, but there's still no answer. It's like the village is completely abandoned, like everyone just up and left in the middle of the night. But then, just as I'm starting to get really creeped out, I hear this sound coming from one of the houses. It's like a faint scratching noise, like someone's trying to get out. I follow the sound to this old, rundown cottage at the edge of the village, and I can see that the door is cracked open just a little bit. I don't know why, but something compels me to go inside. I mean, I figure maybe someone's in trouble, and they need my help. So I push open the door and step inside, and that's when I see them, these people, huddled together in the corner of the room, their eyes wide with fear. I try to ask them what's wrong, but they just stare at me like I'm some kind of monster. And that's when I notice something else. There's this smell in the air, this sickly sweet smell that makes my stomach churn. I realize that something's not right here, that maybe I should get out while I still can. But before I can even turn around, I hear this voice behind me, low and menacing. I spin around, and there's this guy standing in the doorway, blocking my only way out. He's tall and lean, with this wild look in his eyes that makes my blood run cold. He starts talking to me, but I can't even make out what he's saying. It's like his words are coming from some other place, some other time, and all I can focus on is the fear twisting in my gut. I try to run, but he's faster than me, and before I know it, he's grabbed me by the arm and dragged me out of the cottage and into the street. I struggle against him, but he's too strong, and soon I'm surrounded by these other people, all of them staring at me with those same wide, terrified eyes. I realize then that I'm in serious trouble, that these people aren't going to let me go without a fight. And that's when I know I have to do something, anything, to get out of here alive. So I fight, with everything I've got, lashing out at my captors with fists and feet, screaming for help at the top of my lungs. And somehow, against all odds, I break free. I push past them and run as fast as I can, not stopping until I'm back at my car, with the engine running and the tires squealing as I peel out of that cursed village and back onto the open road. I don't know what happened to those people, or why they were so hell-bent on keeping me there. But I do know one thing: I'll never forget the terror of that day, the feeling of being hunted like an animal in the dead of night. And I'll never take another solo road trip through the countryside of Eastern Europe again. Me and my husband were on this road trip along the California coastline, just trying to enjoy some quality time together after our wedding. We're driving along these winding roads, the ocean stretching out beside us, and everything's going great. I mean, the scenery is stunning, the weather's perfect, and we're both feeling really happy. But then, out of nowhere, we see this guy on the side of the road, hitchhiking. Now, normally I wouldn't think anything of it, but there's something about this guy that sets off alarm bells in my head. He's got this wild look in his eyes, like he's not all there, you know? And he's waving his arms around like he's trying to flag us down, like he's desperate for a ride. My husband, being the kind-hearted guy he is, he pulls over to see if the guy needs help. But as soon as the guy gets in the car, I can tell that something's not right. He's fidgeting in his seat, looking around like he's expecting something to jump out at him. And then he starts talking in this low, raspy voice that sends shivers down my spine. He's saying all kinds of crazy stuff about how he needs to get to the next town because he's being chased by some people who want to kill him. And I'm just sitting there, frozen in my seat, trying to ignore the sinking feeling in my stomach. But then things start to get really weird. The guy starts reaching into his pockets, pulling out these knives and other weapons, and my heart starts pounding in my chest. I can see the fear in my husband's eyes, but he's trying to stay calm, trying to reason with the guy and get him to put the weapons away. But it's like the guy's not even listening to us. He's just ranting and raving, waving his weapons around like he's ready to use them at any moment. And that's when I know that we're in serious danger, that this guy isn't just some harmless hitchhiker looking for a ride. He's a threat, a real threat, and we need to get away from him as fast as we can. I start pleading with my husband to drive, to get us out of there before it's too late. And finally, thank God, he listens to me, slamming his foot down on the gas pedal and speeding away from the crazy hitchhiker as fast as the car will go. I can hear the guy yelling behind us, screaming threats and curses as we disappear into the distance. But I don't care. All I care about is getting as far away from him as possible, and making sure that me and my husband are safe. We drive for what feels like hours, the adrenaline pumping through our veins as we put as much distance between us and the hitchhiker as we can. And finally, when we're sure that he's nowhere near us anymore, we stop the car and catch our breath. We sit there in silence for a while, both of us trying to process what just happened. And then my husband turns to me, his eyes filled with concern, and he asks me if I'm okay. And I nod, because even though I'm still shaking with fear, I know that we're safe now, that we made it out of that nightmare alive. But even now, weeks later, I still can't shake the memory of that deranged hitchhiker, and the terror of knowing that our lives were in his hands. It's a road trip I'll never forget, for all the wrong reasons. Alright, so here's the deal. I'm a retired detective, right? And I'm just trying to enjoy my retirement by taking a road trip to visit some old friends in the Midwest. Sounds pretty chill, doesn't it? Well, let me tell you, it turned out to be anything but. So, I'm driving along these quiet country roads, enjoying the scenery and reminiscing about the good old days. But then, out of nowhere, I come across this small town that just gives me the creeps. I mean, there's something about the place that feels off, you know? But being the curious guy that I am, I decide to stop and check it out anyway. I mean, what's the harm, right? Well, turns out, that was a big mistake. As soon as I step out of my car, I can feel eyes on me, like I'm being watched. And when I try to strike up a conversation with some of the locals, they clam up real quick, like they've got something to hide. Now, being a retired detective, I've got a nose for trouble, and something about this town just doesn't sit right with me. So, I start asking around, trying to dig up some dirt on what's going on. And let me tell you, what I find out is not pretty. Turns out, this town is crawling with corruption and murder, and the locals are all in on it. I try to keep a low profile, but before I know it, I've stumbled onto something big. Something that could blow the lid off this whole operation. But of course, that's when things start to go south. I start getting followed, threatened, you name it. It's like these people will stop at nothing to keep their secrets buried. I try to stay one step ahead of them, using all my old detective skills to outsmart them. But it's not easy, let me tell you. These guys are ruthless, and they'll do whatever it takes to protect their interests. I find myself getting deeper and deeper into the thick of it, uncovering more and more evidence of their crimes. And the worst part is, I'm all alone out here, with no backup to call on. But I refuse to back down. I've spent my whole life fighting for justice, and I'm not about to stop now. So, I keep pushing forward, gathering as much evidence as I can and trying to stay one step ahead of my pursuers. And finally, after what feels like an eternity, I manage to crack the case wide open. I expose the corruption, I bring the murderers to justice, and I finally put an end to the reign of terror that's been plaguing this town. And let me tell you, it feels damn good to know that I made a difference. That I used my skills to uncover the truth and bring closure to the families of the victims. So yeah, maybe my road trip didn't turn out quite like I expected. But in the end, I wouldn't change a thing. Because sometimes, you've got to confront the darkness head on, no matter how scary it might be. I'm a single mom, right? And I'm just trying to take my daughter on a road trip to visit some family in the Ozarks. Seemed like a good idea at the time, you know? But let me tell you, things took a turn real quick. We're driving along this desolate country road, just me and my daughter, enjoying the scenery and listening to some tunes. But then, we take a wrong turn, and before we know it, we're completely lost. I try to keep calm, you know, for my daughter's sake. But deep down, I'm freaking out. I mean, we're in the middle of nowhere, with no cell service and no idea where we are. And just when I think things can't get any worse, we come across this creepy-looking compound in the middle of the woods. I mean, it's like something out of a horror movie. I try to turn around and get the hell out of there, but before I can even put the car in reverse, we're surrounded by these people. And let me tell you, there's something off about them. Something not quite right. They're all wearing these weird robes and chanting in some language I've never heard before. And when they see us, they start moving towards the car, like they're about to do something terrible. I lock the doors and tell my daughter to stay quiet, but she's scared out of her mind. And honestly, so am I. I mean, what the hell are we supposed to do? But then, just when it looks like we're done for, we hear this voice coming from the woods. It's a man's voice, and he's telling us to follow him if we want to live. I don't know what else to do, so I throw the car into drive and gun it, following the voice deeper into the woods. And let me tell you, it's the scariest thing I've ever done in my life. But somehow, we make it out of there alive. We're shaking and covered in sweat, but we're alive. And as we drive away from that place, I can't help but feel grateful for whatever or whoever it was that saved us. We make it to our family's place in the Ozarks, and I don't think I've ever been so relieved to see them. I tell them about what happened, but they just look at me like I'm crazy. But I know what I saw, and I know what we went through. And let me tell you, I'll never forget it for as long as I live. So yeah, that road trip didn't exactly go as planned. But in the end, we made it out alive, and that's all that matters. I was on mission, traveling to a remote desert town to investigate reports of strange occurrences. My heart pounded with excitement and trepidation as I navigated the dusty roads, the vast expanse of sand stretching out endlessly around me. As I arrived in the town, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that settled over me like a heavy blanket. The streets were deserted, the buildings crumbling and abandoned, and an eerie silence hung in the air. Undeterred, I set out to interview the locals, hoping to uncover the truth behind the rumors that had brought me here. But as I spoke with them, I quickly realized that there was something deeply wrong with this place. The townsfolk were wary and guarded, their eyes flickering with fear as they spoke in hushed whispers. They told me of strange lights in the sky, of mysterious disappearances, and of a pervasive sense of dread that hung over the town like a dark cloud. Determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, I delved deeper into my investigation, scouring old newspaper archives and interviewing anyone who would talk to me. But the more I learned, the more terrified I became. I uncovered reports of secret government experiments, of shadowy figures lurking in the desert, and of a hidden underground facility where unspeakable horrors were said to take place. As I pieced together the puzzle, I realized that I had stumbled upon something far more sinister than I had ever imagined. The town was a hotbed of conspiracy and intrigue, and I was in way over my head. But I couldn't turn back now, couldn't abandon my quest for the truth. So I pressed on, my nerves frayed and my senses on high alert as I delved deeper into the darkness. As I delved deeper into the darkness, I began to attract unwanted attention. Strange men in suits began following me, their eyes cold and calculating as they watched my every move. I knew that I was in danger, that I had stumbled upon something that powerful people would kill to keep hidden. But I refused to be intimidated, refused to let fear dictate my actions. With every step I took, the noose tightened around my neck, the shadows closing in around me like a vice. But I refused to back down, refused to let them silence me. Finally, I uncovered the truth, a horrifying revelation that shook me to my core. The town was a testing ground for a top-secret government project, a place where human lives were expendable and morality was a distant memory. But as I raced to expose the truth, I found myself trapped in a web of lies and deception, with nowhere to turn and no one to trust. I was alone, hunted by forces far beyond my comprehension. With nowhere left to run, I made a desperate gambit, broadcasting my findings to the world in a last-ditch effort to expose the truth. And as I waited for the inevitable backlash, I braced myself for the storm that was about to descend upon me. But to my surprise, help arrived in the form of a group of brave activists who had been monitoring my broadcasts. Together, we fought back against the forces of darkness, shining a light into the darkest corners of the conspiracy. In the end, justice prevailed, and the truth was revealed for all to see. But the scars of my ordeal will never fully heal, and I know that I will never truly be free from the horrors that I uncovered in that remote desert town. I was on assignment, driving through the Louisiana bayou to investigate a series of mysterious disappearances that had been plaguing the area. The air was thick with humidity, and the dense canopy of trees cast long shadows over the swampy marshland. As I made my way deeper into the bayou, a sense of unease settled over me like a heavy weight. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional chirping of crickets and the distant croak of frogs. But as I drove on, my car suddenly lurched to a halt, the engine sputtering and dying. Panic surged through me as I realized that I was stranded in the middle of nowhere, with no one around to help me. With no other option, I stepped out of the car and surveyed my surroundings, the eerie stillness of the bayou sending shivers down my spine. I knew that I needed to find help, and fast, before whatever had caused my car to break down found me. As I trudged through the muck and mire of the swamp, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that unseen eyes were following my every move. But I pushed on, driven by the need to uncover the truth behind the disappearances that had brought me here. But as night fell, the bayou took on a sinister new life, the darkness seeming to swallow me whole. Every rustle of the underbrush, every distant splash, sent a jolt of fear through me, and I quickened my pace, desperate to escape the suffocating grip of the swamp. But then, just as I began to lose hope, I heard a voice calling out to me from the darkness. Relief flooded through me as I followed the sound, hoping against hope that I had finally found help. But as I drew closer, the voice took on a sinister edge, and I realized with horror that it was not human. Panic seized me as I turned to run, but it was too late. Something grabbed hold of me from behind, dragging me down into the murky depths of the swamp. I struggled and fought with all my strength, but whatever had me in its grasp was too strong. I could feel its cold, clammy hands closing around my throat, choking the life out of me. But then, just when I thought all hope was lost, I heard the sound of approaching footsteps. With a surge of adrenaline, I redoubled my efforts, fighting tooth and nail to break free from my captor's grip. And then, suddenly, I was free, gasping for breath as I scrambled to my feet. I looked up to see a group of locals standing before me, their faces grim and determined. "We've been looking for you," one of them said, his voice filled with urgency. "You need to get out of here, now." With their help, I managed to escape the bayou, my heart pounding in my chest as I fled to safety. But even now, as I sit here recounting my ordeal, I can't shake the feeling that something is still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting to drag me back down into the darkness. I'm a musician, been on tour for a while now. Things were going pretty smooth until my tour bus decided to break down in the middle of nowhere. And when I say nowhere, I mean a small Texas town that I've never even heard of. So here I am, stranded in this deserted town with no idea how to fix the bus or when help is gonna arrive. I figure I might as well make the most of it and explore the place while I wait. But let me tell you, this town gives me the creeps. The streets are empty, and the buildings look like they haven't been touched in years. It's like something out of a zombie movie. As I wander around, I start to notice something strange about the few people I do see. They're all staring at me with these blank expressions, like they're sizing me up or something. I try to brush it off and keep exploring, but the feeling of being watched just won't go away. It's like I can feel eyes on me from every direction. And then, just when I think things can't get any weirder, I stumble upon this old abandoned factory on the outskirts of town. It's massive, with broken windows and graffiti covering the walls. I figure I might as well check it out, see if there's anything interesting inside. But as soon as I step through the door, I realize I've made a huge mistake. The place is pitch black, and I can hear strange noises coming from deeper inside. I try to turn back, but before I can even take a step, I feel something grab me from behind. I struggle and fight, but whatever it is, it's too strong. It drags me deeper into the darkness, and I can feel my heart pounding in my chest. I try to call out for help, but my voice is drowned out by the sounds of whatever is in there with me. And then, just when I think I'm done for, I see a glimmer of light up ahead. I fight with everything I've got, and finally, I break free and stumble out into the open air. I collapse on the ground, gasping for breath and covered in sweat. I have no idea how long I was in there or what happened, but I know one thing for sure. I need to get out of this town, and fast. I scramble to my feet and run as fast as I can, not stopping until I'm back in the relative safety of the main street. But even then, I can't shake the feeling that something is still out there, watching me. I manage to flag down a passing car and hitch a ride back to civilization. I don't know what the hell was going on in that town, and frankly, I don't want to stick around long enough to find out. I make it back to my tour bus and wait for the mechanic to arrive. When he finally does, I waste no time getting the hell out of there, putting as much distance between me and that cursed town as possible. I may never know what really happened in that place, but one thing's for sure, I'll never forget the terror I felt while I was there. And I'll be damned if I ever set foot in that town again. I was on assignment, traveling through the deep south to sample the cuisine of local diners for my food column. As a food critic, I prided myself on my adventurous palate, always willing to try new and exotic dishes. But nothing could have prepared me for what I encountered at that roadside restaurant. The place seemed innocent enough from the outside, a quaint little diner with a faded sign and a front porch lined with rocking chairs. But as soon as I stepped inside, I knew that something was off. The air was heavy with the smell of grease and spices, and the few patrons hunched over their plates seemed to cast furtive glances in my direction. Undeterred, I took a seat at the counter and ordered the daily special, eager to see what culinary delights the Deep South had to offer. But as I waited for my food to arrive, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. When my meal finally arrived, I dug in with gusto, eager to satisfy my hunger after a long day on the road. But as I chewed, a strange taste filled my mouth, something metallic and bitter that made my stomach churn. I pushed my plate away, suddenly feeling queasy, and glanced around the diner, searching for the source of the strange flavor. That's when I saw him, the owner of the restaurant, lurking behind the counter with a sinister gleam in his eye. Something about the way he looked at me sent a shiver down my spine, and I knew in that moment that I needed to get out of there, and fast. But as I made to leave, the owner stepped in front of me, blocking my path with a cold smile. "Leaving so soon?" he asked, his voice dripping with malice. "But you haven't finished your meal yet." I tried to brush past him, but he grabbed hold of my arm with surprising strength, his grip like a vice around my wrist. Panic surged through me as I struggled to break free, but it was no use. I was trapped, at the mercy of this sinister stranger. And then, just when I thought all hope was lost, I heard the sound of approaching footsteps. With a surge of relief, I turned to see a group of locals standing in the doorway, their faces grim and determined. "We've been looking for you," one of them said, his voice filled with urgency. "You need to get out of here, now." With their help, I managed to escape the restaurant, my heart pounding in my chest as I fled to safety. I'm a retired soldier, been through my fair share of battles. But nothing could have prepared me for what I encountered on that road trip through the Appalachian mountains. I was on a mission, you could say. A mission to confront my past, to come to terms with the things I'd seen and done during my time in the military. But as I drove deeper into the mountains, I started to feel like I was being watched. Like there were eyes on me from every direction. I tried to shake off the feeling and focus on the road ahead, but it just kept getting stronger. And then, out of nowhere, I stumbled upon a group of people camped out in the woods. At first, I thought they were just hikers or something. But as I got closer, I could see that they were armed to the teeth and wearing some kind of uniform. I should have turned around and hightailed it out of there right then and there. But something inside me told me to stay and find out what was going on. So I parked my car and approached them cautiously, trying to keep my guard up despite the sinking feeling in my gut. They didn't seem hostile at first, just a bunch of guys talking about survival tactics and preparing for the end of the world. But the longer I stayed, the more I started to realize that something wasn't right. There was this tension in the air, like they were all waiting for something to happen. And then, one of them pulled me aside and whispered something about a game they liked to play. I didn't know what he was talking about at first, but then he started going on about how they liked to hunt people for sport. How they were waiting for the perfect prey to come along. I tried to play it cool and act like I was interested, but inside I was freaking out. I knew I had to get out of there before they realized who I really was. So I made up some excuse about needing to get back on the road and said my goodbyes. But as I turned to leave, I could feel their eyes boring into my back. I made it back to my car and peeled out of there as fast as I could, not stopping until I was miles away from the creepy campsite. I tried to put it out of my mind and focus on my original mission, but I couldn't shake the feeling that those survivalists were still out there, waiting for their next victim. I kept driving, pushing deeper into the mountains in search of answers. But everywhere I went, it felt like they were one step ahead of me. I started to feel like I was losing my mind, like I was trapped in some kind of twisted nightmare. But I refused to give up, refused to let those psychos get the best of me. And then, just when I was starting to lose hope, I stumbled upon a group of park rangers out on patrol. I told them everything about the survivalists and their sick game. They didn't waste any time launching an investigation, and before I knew it, they had rounded up the whole group and put them behind bars. I breathed a sigh of relief, knowing that I had done my part to put an end to their reign of terror. I'm a wildlife photographer, always chasing that perfect shot of elusive creatures in the great outdoors. So when I heard about the opportunity to capture images of the wildlife in the vast wilderness of Alaska, I jumped at the chance. Armed with my camera and a sense of adventure, I set out on a road trip through the frozen landscape, eager to capture the beauty of nature in its purest form. But as I ventured deeper into the wilderness, I started to feel a sense of unease creeping over me. The vast expanse of snow-covered land seemed to stretch on forever, and it was easy to lose your bearings in such an unforgiving environment. I tried to push aside my fears and focus on my mission, but the feeling of being watched never quite left me. It was like there was something out there, lurking just beyond the edge of my vision. I kept telling myself it was just my imagination, that there was nothing out there but the wind and the snow. But deep down, I knew there was something more sinister at play. And then, one night as I made camp in a remote clearing, I heard it. A low growl echoing through the trees, sending shivers down my spine. I tried to tell myself it was just a wolf or a bear passing through, but the sound was like nothing I'd ever heard before. It was like whatever was out there was calling to me, beckoning me into the darkness. I tried to ignore it and focus on getting some rest, but sleep eluded me that night. Every sound seemed magnified, every shadow filled with unseen dangers. And then, just as the first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon, I saw it. A pair of glowing eyes staring back at me from the edge of the clearing, filled with a hunger that sent a chill down my spine. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest as I stared back at those eyes, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. And then, without warning, the creature lunged forward, its massive form barreling towards me with a speed and ferocity that took my breath away. I scrambled to my feet and ran, my heart pounding in my chest as I fled through the snow-covered forest. But no matter how fast I ran, the creature was always right behind me, its heavy footsteps echoing through the trees. I tried to shake it off, to lose it in the dense undergrowth, but it was relentless. It was like it was toying with me, drawing out the chase for its own twisted amusement. I pushed myself to the limit, my lungs burning with exertion as I raced through the wilderness. But just when I thought I couldn't go on any longer, I saw it. The road, stretching out before me like a lifeline in the darkness. With one final burst of energy, I sprinted towards it, the creature hot on my heels. But just as it seemed like all hope was lost, I saw the lights of a passing car up ahead. I screamed for help, waving my arms frantically as the car drew closer. And then, mercifully, it stopped, the driver jumping out to help me just as the creature closed in behind me. I collapsed into their arms, gasping for breath as they helped me into the safety of their car. And as we drove away into the night, leaving the creature far behind us, I knew that I had narrowly escaped a fate worse than death. But even now, as I sit here writing this, I can't shake the feeling that the creature is still out there, waiting for its next victim in the vast wilderness of Alaska. And I can only hope that whoever comes after me is better prepared to face the horrors that lurk in the darkness. I was out in the Australian outback, seeking adventure and excitement in the rugged wilderness. The vast expanse of desert stretched out before me, and I relished the challenge of exploring its untamed terrain. But as I drove deeper into the heart of the outback, disaster struck. My car sputtered and died, leaving me stranded in the middle of nowhere with no one around for miles. Panic surged through me as I realized the gravity of my situation. The outback was unforgiving, and I knew that I needed to find help fast if I was going to survive. With no other options, I set out on foot, hoping to stumble across a passing traveler or a nearby settlement. But as I trudged through the scorching heat, my thirst grew more intense, and my energy began to wane. Just when I thought I couldn't go on any longer, I spotted a group of figures on the horizon. Relief flooded through me as I stumbled towards them, desperate for assistance. But as I drew closer, my heart sank. The figures were not human, but a pack of feral dingoes, their hungry eyes fixed on me with predatory intensity. Fear gripped me as I realized that I was their prey now, alone and defenseless in the vast emptiness of the outback. With no other choice, I turned and fled, the sound of their snarls echoing in my ears as they gave chase. I ran as fast as I could, my heart pounding in my chest as I raced across the desert, the relentless sun beating down on me from above. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that the dingoes were closing in on me, their hot breath on my heels. With every step, my energy waned, and I knew that I couldn't keep this up much longer. I needed to find shelter, or else I would be at the mercy of the desert and its savage inhabitants. Just when I thought all hope was lost, I spotted a rocky outcrop in the distance. With renewed determination, I pushed myself forward, ignoring the burning pain in my legs as I sprinted towards safety. As I reached the shelter of the rocks, I collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath and praying that the dingoes had lost my scent. But as I lay there, trembling and exhausted, I knew that I couldn't let my guard down for a moment. I huddled in the shadows, listening for any sign of danger as the sun sank below the horizon, casting the desert into darkness. The night was long and filled with terrors, but I dared not close my eyes for fear of what might be lurking in the shadows. As dawn broke, I emerged from my hiding place, weak and shaken but alive. The dingoes were nowhere to be seen, and I knew that I had narrowly escaped what could have been my death. I'm a travel blogger, always on the lookout for the next great adventure to share with my readers. So when I heard about the abandoned ghost towns of the American West, I knew I had to see them for myself. Armed with my camera and a sense of excitement, I set out on a road trip to document these forgotten places, eager to uncover their secrets and share them with the world. But as I arrived at my first destination, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that settled over me. The town seemed deserted at first glance, but there was something off about it, something that sent a chill down my spine. I tried to push aside my fears and focus on my mission, but the sense of foreboding only grew stronger as I explored the empty streets and dilapidated buildings. And then, as I rounded a corner, I saw them. A group of figures lurking in the shadows, their eyes following my every move with a hunger that made my blood run cold. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest as I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. Were these the former inhabitants of the town, still lingering here long after everyone else had gone? I tried to approach them, to see if they needed help or if they could tell me what had happened to the town. But as I drew closer, I could see that there was something not quite right about them. Their movements were jerky and unnatural, like they were marionettes being controlled by some unseen force. And their eyes, empty and lifeless, seemed to stare right through me with a malevolence that sent a shiver down my spine. I knew I needed to get out of there, to escape before whatever had taken hold of the town turned its sights on me. But as I turned to leave, I heard a voice calling out to me from the darkness. It was a woman's voice, soft and melodic, but there was something wrong about it, something that made my skin crawl. She was asking for help, begging me to stay and keep her company in this lonely place. I tried to ignore her and keep walking, but her voice followed me, growing louder and more insistent with each step I took. And then, just as I thought I couldn't take it anymore, I saw her. She emerged from the shadows, her face twisted into a grotesque mockery of a smile as she reached out to me with hands that seemed to be made of something other than flesh and bone. I screamed and ran, my heart pounding in my chest as I fled through the empty streets. But no matter how fast I ran, the town seemed to stretch on forever, its twisted alleys and crumbling buildings like a maze from which there was no escape. I stumbled and fell, scraping my hands and knees on the rough pavement as I scrambled to my feet and kept running. But no matter how far I went, the woman was always right behind me, her voice echoing in my ears like a nightmare that wouldn't end. I knew I had to find a way out, to escape this hellish place before it consumed me whole. And then, just when it seemed like all hope was lost, I saw it. A break in the buildings, a sliver of moonlight shining down from above. With one final burst of energy, I sprinted towards it, my lungs burning with exertion as I fought to reach safety. And then, just as I reached the edge of the town, I felt her hand close around my ankle, pulling me back into the darkness with a strength that seemed impossible for someone so frail. I screamed and kicked, lashing out with all the strength I had left as I fought to break free. And then, just when it seemed like all hope was lost, I felt her grip loosen, her fingers slipping away as I tumbled out of her grasp and into the waiting arms of a stranger. I collapsed into their embrace, gasping for breath as they helped me to my feet and led me away from the town and the horrors that lurked within its shadowy streets. I had been driving for hours, the road stretching endlessly before me as I journeyed through the desolate landscape. It was getting late, and exhaustion was beginning to take its toll. I knew I needed to find a place to rest for the night, somewhere safe where I could recharge before continuing my journey. That's when I spotted it, a rundown motel nestled on the side of the road, its neon sign flickering weakly in the darkness. Pulling into the parking lot, I felt a shiver run down my spine as I surveyed the dimly lit building. It looked like something straight out of a horror movie, but desperate times called for desperate measures. I parked my car and gathered my belongings, steeling myself for whatever awaited me inside. As I stepped through the front door, a musty smell assaulted my senses, and I suppressed a gag as I made my way to the front desk. The clerk behind the counter eyed me with a mixture of boredom and suspicion, but I ignored his stare as I requested a room for the night. He handed me a key without a word, and I quickly made my way down the narrow hallway to my assigned room. The corridor was eerily quiet, the only sound echoing footsteps against the linoleum floor. Entering my room, I felt a wave of relief wash over me as I closed the door behind me. But that relief was short-lived as I surveyed the dingy interior. The wallpaper was peeling, the carpet stained with unknown substances, and a chill hung in the air that had nothing to do with the temperature outside. I quickly locked the door and set about making myself as comfortable as possible, though the thought of sleep seemed impossible in such a place. I tried to distract myself with my phone, scrolling through social media in an attempt to forget where I was. But as the minutes ticked by, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that settled over me like a heavy blanket. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the curtains sent my heart racing, and I found myself jumping at shadows in the dim light. And then I heard it, a faint scratching coming from somewhere outside the room. I froze, my breath catching in my throat as I strained to listen. The scratching grew louder, more insistent, and I felt a cold sweat break out across my skin. I considered calling the front desk, but something held me back, a primal instinct warning me not to draw attention to myself. Instead, I crept over to the window and cautiously peered outside, my heart pounding in my chest. What I saw sent a jolt of fear straight through me. There, lurking in the shadows just beyond the pool of light cast by the motel's flickering sign, was a figure. It was tall and gaunt, its features obscured by the darkness, but I could feel its eyes boring into me with an intensity that made my blood run cold. I stumbled back from the window, my mind racing with panic. Who was this person, and what did they want with me? I knew I had to get out of there, but the thought of leaving the safety of my room was almost too much to bear. But then I heard it again, the scratching, now accompanied by a low, guttural growl that sent shivers down my spine. With a surge of adrenaline, I made up my mind. I had to leave, and I had to leave now. Gathering my courage, I flung open the door and bolted down the hallway, my heart pounding in my ears. I could hear footsteps behind me, echoing off the walls, and I knew I was being pursued. I didn't dare look back, didn't dare slow down, until I reached the front desk where the clerk stood, staring at me with wide eyes. Without a word, I thrust the key into his hand and dashed out the door, the cool night air hitting me like a punch to the chest. I didn't stop running until I reached my car, and even then, I didn't feel safe. I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold them, until finally, I managed to start the engine and peel out of the parking lot, leaving the motel and its sinister inhabitants far behind me. As I drove into the night, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that clung to me like a shadow. Who were those people, and what did they want with me? The drive up to the mountains was long and winding, the road sneaking through the rugged landscape like a ribbon of asphalt. I had been looking forward to this trip for weeks, eager to reconnect with my daughter after years of estrangement. But as I pulled up to her cabin, nestled deep in the heart of the Colorado wilderness, a sense of unease settled over me like a heavy fog. Parking the car, I stepped out onto the gravel driveway and surveyed my surroundings. The cabin looked deserted, its windows dark and empty. I called out for my daughter, but there was no response, only the distant sound of the wind whispering through the trees. My heart pounding in my chest, I approached the front door and tried the handle, but it was locked tight. With a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach, I pulled out my spare key and let myself in, the door creaking ominously on its hinges as I pushed it open. Inside, the cabin was eerily silent, the air thick with the scent of pine and something else, something metallic and acrid. I called out for my daughter again, but there was still no answer, only the sound of my own voice echoing off the walls. I searched every room, every nook and cranny, but there was no sign of her. It was as if she had simply vanished into thin air, leaving behind nothing but an empty shell of a home. Panic rising in my chest, I rushed outside and scanned the surrounding forest, hoping against hope that she had simply gone for a walk and gotten lost. But there was no sign of her, no trace of her presence anywhere. Fighting back a sense of despair, I resolved to search the area myself, to leave no stone unturned until I found her. I grabbed a flashlight and a jacket and set off into the wilderness, the darkness closing in around me like a suffocating blanket. For hours, I trudged through the woods, my heart pounding in my ears with every step. The only sound was the crunch of leaves beneath my feet and the distant howl of a wolf echoing through the night. And then, just when I was beginning to lose hope, I saw it, a faint glimmer of light in the distance. I quickened my pace, my breath coming in ragged gasps as I stumbled toward the source. As I drew closer, I could make out the outline of a small clearing, illuminated by the soft glow of a campfire. And there, sitting by the fire, was my daughter. Relief flooded through me as I rushed forward and enveloped her in a tight embrace. She looked up at me with tear-stained eyes, and I knew that whatever had happened, we would get through it together. But as we sat by the fire, warming ourselves against the chill of the night, my daughter began to tell me her story, and I felt a chill run down my spine. She had been out for a walk earlier that evening when she stumbled upon a group of strange men lurking in the woods. They had chased her through the trees, their eyes filled with malice, until she had finally managed to lose them and find her way back to the cabin. As she spoke, I felt a cold knot of fear form in the pit of my stomach. Who were these men, and what did they want with my daughter? I knew that we had to get out of there, to leave this place far behind us before it was too late. Gathering our belongings, we made our way back to the cabin and packed up the car, our movements frantic and desperate. As we drove away from that isolated cabin in the mountains, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, that those men were still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for their next victim. But we made it out safe, my daughter and I, and as we drove down the winding mountain roads, I vowed never to return to that cursed place again. For in those remote mountains of Colorado, there are secrets best left undisturbed, and dangers lurking in the darkness that are better off forgotten. I had been driving for hours, the monotony of the journey broken only by the occasional flicker of my headlights illuminating the darkened forest on either side of the highway. As I rounded a bend in the road, I saw something up ahead, a figure standing by the side of the road, waving frantically in the darkness. My heart skipped a beat as I slowed down and pulled over to the side of the road, my headlights casting a pale glow on the figure's face. I rolled down the window and called out to the person, asking if they needed help. But as they stepped into the light, I felt a chill run down my spine. There was something off about them, something that sent alarm bells ringing in the back of my mind. Their eyes were wild and unfocused, darting back and forth as if searching for something unseen. Their clothes were dirty and torn, and there was a wild, desperate look in their eyes that made my blood run cold. Against my better judgment, I stepped out of the car and approached the person, asking them what was wrong. But instead of answering, they lunged at me, their hands reaching out as if to grab hold of me. Instinct took over, and I scrambled back to my car, slamming the door shut and locking it behind me. The person pounded on the windows, their screams echoing through the night, but I refused to let them in, my heart pounding in my chest as I fumbled for my phone. With shaking hands, I dialed 911 and reported the incident, my voice trembling as I described the person's erratic behavior. The operator assured me that help was on the way, but as I waited for the police to arrive, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled over me like a heavy fog. Minutes stretched into hours as I sat in the car, watching the figure pace back and forth in the darkness. It was as if they were waiting for something, biding their time until they could make their move. And then, just when I was beginning to lose hope, I saw the flashing lights of a police car approaching in the distance. Relief flooded through me as I watched them pull up beside me, the officers stepping out of the car and approaching the figure with caution. I watched as they wrestled the person to the ground, their screams echoing through the night as they were handcuffed and placed in the back of the police car. It was only then that I allowed myself to breathe a sigh of relief, the tension draining from my body as I watched the car drive away into the night. As I sat there in the darkness, waiting for the adrenaline to wear off, I couldn't help but wonder what had driven that person to such desperate measures. The road stretched out endlessly before me, winding its way through the heart of the countryside as I drove on my cross-country road trip. I had been traveling for days, exploring new destinations and scouting for potential spots to recommend to my clients back home. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the landscape, I decided it was time to find a place to rest for the night. Spotting a quaint bed and breakfast nestled on the outskirts of a small town, I pulled into the gravel parking lot and parked my car. The building looked charming and inviting, its warm lights glowing softly through the windows as if beckoning me inside. Stepping out of the car, I stretched my tired limbs and made my way to the front door, the crunch of gravel beneath my feet echoing in the stillness of the evening. As I entered the inn, I was greeted by the warm aroma of home-cooked food and the sound of soft music playing in the background. The innkeeper, A kindly-looking woman with silver hair and a warm smile welcomed me and showed me to my room. It was cozy and inviting, with floral wallpaper and a plush bed that looked like it would be perfect for a good night's sleep. As I settled in for the night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about the inn. There was an air of secrecy about the place, a feeling that there were hidden depths lurking beneath its charming exterior. Unable to shake my unease, I decided to do a little exploring. Slipping out of my room, I made my way down the narrow hallway, the floorboards creaking beneath my feet as I went. I came to a staircase leading down to the basement and hesitated for a moment before descending into the darkness below. The air was cool and musty, and I felt a shiver run down my spine as I stepped into the dimly lit room below. As my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I saw rows of shelves lining the walls, each one stacked with jars filled with strange, unidentifiable substances. My heart began to race as I realized that I had stumbled upon something sinister, something that I was never meant to see. Before I could make sense of what I was seeing, I heard footsteps echoing in the darkness behind me. Whirling around, I saw the innkeeper standing in the doorway, her smile replaced by a cold, calculating expression. I knew then that I was in danger, that I had stumbled upon something far more sinister than I could have ever imagined. With adrenaline coursing through my veins, I turned and fled, racing back up the stairs and out into the night. As I sprinted across the parking lot to my car, I heard the sound of pursuit behind me, the innkeeper's voice calling out for me to stop. Ignoring her cries, I fumbled with my keys and threw myself into the driver's seat, slamming the door shut behind me and locking it tight. With trembling hands, I started the engine and peeled out of the parking lot, leaving the bed and breakfast far behind me. As I drove into the night, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had settled over me, the fear that I had narrowly escaped a fate far worse than anything I could have imagined. But one thing was for sure, I would never forget the terror of that night, the feeling of being hunted like prey in the darkness of that quaint little inn. So, I was out on one of my usual adventures, driving through the back roads of New England. I love exploring the hidden gems, the places most people don't bother with. It was late afternoon when I spotted this old, run-down mansion nestled deep in the forest. I couldn't resist the urge to check it out. I parked my car by the side of the road and made my way through the overgrown path leading to the mansion. The place looked like it hadn't been touched in years. Windows were broken, the roof sagged, and ivy crawled up the walls. As I stepped inside, the air felt heavy, like I was being watched. I brushed it off as just my imagination running wild. I mean, old buildings like this always have a creepy vibe, right? But the further I explored, the stronger the feeling became. I wandered through the rooms, each one more decrepit than the last. Furniture lay overturned, cobwebs draped from the ceilings, and the floorboards creaked beneath my feet. It was like stepping back in time to a place long forgotten. That's when I heard it, a faint whisper echoing through the halls. My heart pounded in my chest as I strained to make out the words. It sounded like someone or something was calling my name. I tried to shake off the feeling of unease and pressed on, determined to uncover the secrets of this abandoned mansion. But with each passing moment, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. It was like they were guiding me, leading me deeper into the darkness. I stumbled upon a staircase hidden behind a tapestry, and without thinking, I began to ascend. The wood groaned beneath my weight, and dust billowed up with each step. It felt like I was climbing into the belly of the beast. At the top of the stairs, I found myself in a narrow hallway lined with closed doors. The whispers seemed to be coming from behind one of them, so I hesitantly reached for the handle and pushed it open. What I saw inside stopped me dead in my tracks. The room was filled with flickering candlelight, casting eerie shadows on the walls. And standing in the center of the room were figures, shadows of people long gone. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe as they turned their empty gazes towards me. It was like they were trapped in some kind of purgatory, unable to move on to whatever lay beyond. And then, as suddenly as they appeared, they were gone. The room fell silent, the only sound the pounding of my own heart. I knew I had to get out of there, had to escape before whatever haunted that place came back for me. I stumbled back down the stairs, practically running through the halls until I reached the front door. But when I tried to leave, it wouldn't budge. It was like something was holding it shut, trapping me inside with whatever lurked within those walls. Panic surged through me as I frantically searched for another way out. I could feel the presence closing in around me, suffocating me with its icy grip. But just when I thought all hope was lost, I spotted a window cracked open just wide enough for me to squeeze through. I didn't hesitate. I dove headfirst through the opening, ignoring the pain as shards of glass bit into my skin. I landed hard on the ground outside, scrambling to my feet and sprinting towards my car. I didn't stop driving until I was miles away from that cursed mansion, the memory of those whispers still echoing in my mind. I don't know what I stumbled upon that day, and I don't think I ever want to find out. All I know is that I'll never go back there again, not for all the gold in the world. I was driving my truck through the back roads of Louisiana, trying to avoid a traffic jam on the interstate. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the empty fields and swamps that stretched out on either side of the road. As I rounded a bend, I saw a figure standing by the side of the road, her thumb outstretched in a silent plea for a ride. She was dressed in tattered clothes, her hair wild and unkempt, and something about her sent a shiver down my spine. Against my better judgment, I pulled over and rolled down the window, asking if she needed a lift. She didn't say a word, just nodded silently and climbed into the cab. I tried to make small talk as we drove, but she remained silent, her eyes fixed on the road ahead with an intensity that made my skin crawl. As we passed through the darkening countryside, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about the woman. Her presence seemed to weigh heavy on me, filling the cab with an oppressive sense of dread. Suddenly, she spoke, her voice low and raspy. She asked me to take her to a remote farmhouse deep in the bayou, warning me not to stray from the path. I nodded, my heart pounding in my chest as I followed her directions, the winding roads growing darker with each passing mile. When we finally arrived at the farmhouse, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. But as I helped the woman out of the truck, I noticed a strange mark on her wrist, glowing faintly in the moonlight. Before I could ask about it, she disappeared into the darkness, leaving me alone in the silence of the bayou. I tried to shake off the encounter as I climbed back into my truck and continued on my way. But as I drove, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me from the shadows, waiting to pounce. Hours passed, and still, the feeling of unease lingered, growing stronger with each passing mile. I tried to focus on the road ahead, but my mind kept drifting back to the mysterious woman and the farmhouse in the bayou. As I rounded another bend in the road, I saw her again, standing by the side of the road with her thumb outstretched. Panic surged through me as I realized that I had been driving in circles, trapped in some kind of twisted nightmare. I slammed on the brakes and turned the truck around, desperate to escape the cursed road and the woman who haunted it. But no matter how fast I drove, I couldn't seem to shake her. She appeared at every turn, her presence growing more sinister with each passing moment. I knew then that I was caught in some kind of supernatural trap, a pawn in a game I couldn't hope to understand. With no other options, I turned off the road and into the swamp, hoping to lose her in the dense tangle of trees and underbrush. But the woman followed, her laughter echoing through the darkness as I stumbled through the muck and mire. I ran until my legs gave out beneath me, collapsing to the ground in exhaustion and despair. I was lost, alone, and at the mercy of forces beyond my comprehension. But just when I thought all hope was lost, I heard the sound of voices in the distance. It was a search party, come to rescue me from the clutches of the bayou. With their help, I was able to escape the cursed road and the woman who haunted it.